Welcome to HR Voices, real talk with people leaders who are in it every day. We get into the messy stuff, the challenges that keep them up at night, and how they're actually fixing them. No corporate fluff, just smart conversations for people who care about people. HR Voices is brought to you by All Voices, the platform that cuts hours of manual HR work with step-by-step workflows and AI to assist with investigations, performance improvement, accommodations, leave requests, and more, so you can get back to the human side of HR. Welcome to HR Voices. I'm Emily Finnick, and today I get to chat with Paula Slater, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at IAC Group. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Emily.
Yes. So IAC Group stands for International Automotive Components Group, and your company supplies automotive interiors for car manufacturers. Can you tell us a little bit more about the company, the people that work at IAC, and your role as CHRO?
For sure. So we're an automotive supplier, tier one automotive supplier, which means we're basically last stop before it goes into the assembly plants of our customers, which are the major OEMs. Think about Ford, GM, Stellantis, and so on. Just the interiors obviously can be many different parts. We do anything from like the headliners, basically the door panels. So we do parts, and we also assembly the different components that go into those parts so that we can ship them over to our customers. As an automotive supplier, we are in the Detroit area, so our offices are headquartered in Southfield. Today, we are a company that has presence over Europe and North America. Mostly, let's say, we have presence where we have our customers, right, where we're close to those OE plants. And we currently have about 12,000 employees. We're about a $2 billion company. And most of our employees are at the plants, at the manufacturing locations. And of course, we have, a certain amount of employees in corporate offices or engineering centers. But the majority of the people that we serve from an HR perspective is at the plants, working in multiple shifts.
Right. So tell me a little bit about that. I get to meet with all sorts of people leaders, and we've had a couple of guests on from manufacturing. So I'm curious, when you think about the people working in the plants and the things that they struggle with day to day, what would you say has been their biggest challenge in the past year?
Well, the biggest challenge right now for automotive, it's a lot of the uncertainty that has come with electrification and how, let's say, the volumes have been modified. And so, as I mentioned, we are last stop before the customer, right? So if our customers, decide to change the amount of production or the amount of cars that they're going to put out there in the market, then obviously we are the first ones affected by it. So there's right now a lot of volatility and, let's say, a lot of uncertainty in terms of the stability of the volumes that we have to produce, right? So I think the biggest challenge throughout, whether that's because of our own unique industry or whether that's because of even trends, right, with the way that work is being performed, it's actually just that uncertainty and, being able to adapt, to quickly adapt to change. And I think everyone in manufacturing would agree with me that when you have uncertainty, the biggest, let's say, thing that you can do for people is communicate. There's not such thing as over communication, right? People have to understand what's really going on behind so that they're able to cope with it better, right? When it comes to communication, it's obviously that relationship in between the immediate supervisor and the employee. And a lot of times, unfortunately, information doesn't flow all the way through, or leadership is not there with those skills to properly communicate what the situation or the context is. So I guess in the face of uncertainty for any reason, in my experience, communication or the preparation for the supervisors to be able to manage that challenge is always one of the biggest things that we have to work on.
Yes.
Right.
You also get the leaders who say something once and think that they've communicated it, when the
Right.
reality is that people need to hear it 6, 7, 8 times before they can actually, recall and process and understand, the context of what you're trying to tell them. It's funny, I
Exactly.
spoke with a woman yesterday who leads people at a company that couldn't be more different from IAC. She's in like a technology product that assists with recruitment, and so
Uh-huh.
she said the same thing, that the biggest challenge was uncertainty and that the way that she's tackling that is with communication. And so I love seeing these connections from industry to industry, even when the context is entirely different, the challenges can feel the same.
Right, right. At some point, I think in the workplace, right, it was more about, hey, that stability. Like I go into a company, I stay there for a long time. There was a lot of predictability. And now there's not, right? In the world that we live on, things change quite fast. So, for example, the other challenge that we face is obviously the skills, right? And the way that work is being performed. I mean, yes, AI is being introduced. AI is a huge enabler to do the work in a better way, right? But then people need different skills, right? They need different tools for, to perform their job. So again, it's like, it's a change, right? So it's always change management, right? And how do you provide, let's say, psychological safety and security without being able to provide a certain scenario, right? You just have to pass confidence. And that is by far, I think, the biggest challenge that we will all face as leaders, not only as HR, but as leaders in the next 5 to 10 years, right? Not even five. I think in the next 2 years, things are changing quite fast.
Yes. So when you think about the nature of your workforce being sort of on the front line, not in an office, how do you communicate with them? Like, how do you ensure that they feel included in the culture that you're building, that they understand the messages that are coming from your leadership team? What does that look like?
So I have a very particular way of viewing it from the standpoint of, to me, we could, from an HR perspective, do all sorts of posters, materials, send out all sorts of presentation toolkits for managers, and that would still not do the job. I mean, that's about maybe a 5% or a 10% of what you need, right? In the end, that communication and the strength of the relationship always needs to be in the supervisor versus person, right? So, we hear it all the time. People don't quit companies; they quit managers or they quit their boss, right? And that's the same way that you have to pass on culture. So, if I think about it from a broader perspective, my role as CHRO is to make sure that our CEO and our executive leadership team are really leaders that are living and breathing the behaviors that we are expecting others to pass, right? Because if they do this, right, then the next wave down, right, will do theirs. And of course, we pair that with accountability. So not only do they have to do the behaviors, right, but also they have to make their teams accountable for following same behaviors. And so if you take that down the chain, all the way through a supervisor at the plant, then that's how you can actually build culture and communication in a sustainable way. Now, we don't fool ourselves because, we know that this is not going to happen. It's not something that happens very quickly. But what we do is then we do pair it with some HR initiatives and some tools, right? So we do have the expectation and we're launching, for example, a revamped supervisory training module. It's more than a training, it's more of a development module where then there's like standardized content, but HR is a facilitator at our plans. Leadership and HR are really partnering in terms of how we are developing or taking these sessions. And then, from there, they're going to have to do this from their leadership team and every location to their next layer down, to the next layer down, right? And at least we do have some, minimum expectations and standardized concept, but it's not 100% prescriptive, right? And it's definitely something that you have to do high touch, because I would say yeah, there's a certain degree of online learning that can happen. But when you talk about the development process, you're going to be able to have that exchange, right? So not only do I give you information, but I receive how you're feeling about it and how you're absorbing that information. So it's a process. It's a process that combines both. Again, as I mentioned, like just making sure that the leadership at the top is doing those behaviors and reflecting those throughout the organization, building accountability, while at the same time, we also collaborate with them on minimum standards and a way in which we can take that, on a broader scale at the different locations.
Yeah. Yes, it's not just communicating out, but the listening, the feedback process, right? I
Exactly.
saw on LinkedIn that you just conducted some visits to multiple locations. Is sort of that person to person connection. Do you think that that's important for leadership to sort of be seen on site if you have an organization with a front line?
For sure, for sure. And we always, when we obviously visit the locations, right, there's always a purpose. But, as we go into the plant tour, so for example, we're very big on safety. We've had great improvement in our safety record. I mean, there's no healthy culture without the right level of safety, compliance, ethical behavior. Those for me are kind of like the basic, rules of respect. And then you go from there building, over that. But what we do in those visits, even from our CEO, all of the leaders, right? We kind of try to keep certain focus in terms of, yeah, if we're working on something safety related, we go, we ask, we have certain level of conversation with people about it. As we're walking the floor, then you make sure that you're following and you're doing those behaviors yourself. If you see something unsafe, if you see, it's even the simple things, right? You see trash, you see somebody that doesn't have their protection equipment. You take a pause and you make the observation, and also in the flip side, because people work better through recognition. If you see something that's going on really well, then making that recognition and making sure that the person feels acknowledged, or those plans that have done strides in regards to that, then we take the time to recognize it and to make sure that this recognition is also acknowledged, at a corporate level.
Yeah, that's a great point. You can't just come in and visit. They don't regularly see you and, you're only just nitpicking on all the mistakes they're making. I don't think that they'd be excited to see you
Yeah, exactly.
if that was the case.
Exactly.
Um, well, that's wonderful. You did mention AI earlier, and I know I'm not as familiar with, what AI is capable of within a manufacturing context. I work in SaaS. Maybe could you talk to us a little bit about how AI is changing the game for your employees, like what impact it's having and how you're experimenting with it?
Yeah. So, I mean, let me put it this way. You have the AI. I'm trying to break down a little bit of the complexity of it, because there's so many things that can be considered AI these days.
Right.
So if I can break it down, I would say you have, let's say, the more typical AI that we as individuals are starting to use or starting to get familiar with, or those back office, let's say, operations, or the way that AI is complementing some of the processes or the systems that we already use. Then there's the AI that's embedded in the manufacturing process. For the manufacturing process, the biggest challenge is data and the amount of data that you have, and making sure that the parameters of that data are set up properly. When you do have that, right, then you are able to implement these tools that will obviously look at what you probably already have, let's say, on cameras or on some of your quality controls, right, of your product. And they're able to take, let's say, the parts that are either not compliant from a quality perspective, or that they have a defect, or that, for example, if you are using temperatures or special material like glue, or things that require very specific parameters, right? Then AI is able to look at the data and tell you, like, hey, for example, this defect, right, is due to X, Y, or Z, and then it's able to standardize the measures or the conditions under which you operate. So from the standpoint of, let's say, business case, um, it's very strong. The economics of all of these are very strong, right? Because then you can quickly turn this technology into returns on investment based on, let's say, the amount of compliant product that you get out there, or the reduction on your quality claims, or even in automotive, right? And especially in interiors, even if like there's a scratch or there's like a little stain, you're out of the picture. So it's like, okay, what do I have to do? Now, the problem in manufacturing with AI and with a lot of the innovation and the technology is like, where do you get the money from, right? Because even having, let's say, the technological power to host some of the information or the data points that you would need, or to do those parameters is not easy. So we are in partnership with with a specific university in the US, where, we give them data, they use our data for their own research. And on our side, we benefit from, having them look at those parameters and helping us set, let's say, our base properly, so then we can work on those projects. And of course, I do think the big challenge with AI for companies these days is, how do you pair up all of those available tools and all of those applications to the cybersecurity and restrictions that you have to protect, data of employees, data of your company, IP, competitive data, right? And a lot of times, unfortunately, it's in contradiction. And so there's a very fine line, because you wanna step up the pace, but at the same time, you got to have all of your systems working together, right? And you can't put things at risk. So I think if you talk to any HR leader these days, they will tell you, yeah, it's great. We want to go all for AI. We want to incorporate more of it in our strategy. But then we have all of these limitations from an IT perspective, and so you got to work together with that.
Absolutely. I just met with Deloitte and the future of work, Kyle Forrest there, and he shared with me some research that Deloitte had done, that even when enterprise companies provide, like, approved AI tools to use at work, that half of people still use their own personal AI tools. I'm thinking more of like a Chat GPT, right? And the reason is that they don't trust the company. They don't trust the company to, you want me to use this tool so I can train it to do my job, right? They don't want to share their best prompts. They don't want to share their best ideas because of that trust gap. And, I think the more that we talk about, the more of these headlines we see of AI replacing people, the bigger that trust gap will remain, right? So it's a big challenge. And I think a lot of the challenge is landing on people leaders to figure out, which is, it's not an easy one, right? How do you build trust with a technology that inherently has so many risks? So very complicated.
It is very complicated. And I think human resources is right now, let's say, at a crossroads in terms of what our role is in our organizations and with our workforce. Because, you think about what the transformation means, and it also means a lot of reskilling, right? And so then how are you going to approach it? Is it going to be on the individual? Is it going to be in the company? Then, trying to figure out, okay, what skills are the ones that are actually going to be required, right? Because to your point about building trust, is like, if I'm going to start going down the path of, hey, these are the new skills that are required, and then 6 months down, oh, those skills are not needed really, now we found these other these other ones. It's like, okay, are you leading me on the right path here, right?
But you also don't know.
Right.
To your point, right? To go back to the start of this conversation, we're all existing in this moment of extreme uncertainty. And so, you might in good faith believe with your whole heart that these are the skills that your workforce needs. And then the entire situation could change in 6 months, right? But you are the one who has now broken trust and lost credibility in that process. So, again, it is complicated.
It is very complicated, because if you translate that then to, okay, so then what type of qualities or skills from a leadership perspective people need? You need a lot of emotional intelligence as you're, navigating these waters. You need a lot of empathy. You need a lot of, hey, let me hear you out, hear me out, right? To build that trust. And this is something that, we haven't been taught. Most people have not been taught. We're not high on it as a society. In fact, I think technology is making it even worse, right? People can barely have a conversation face to face because it's easier to be, behind your phone or your text. And so if you think about it, let's say the way that technology is leading in terms of the development of our, let's say, human skills, it's not favorable to what's needed to actually navigate the change management process. So we as HR leaders need to be, constantly stepping back in and bringing that human element, right, to the whole equation.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I say all the time that this does feel like HR's moment to shine, but I think you've just articulated why so well. The skills that HR has are so needed in this moment for all the reasons you just described. And so I'm really looking forward to the next couple of years and seeing how the CHRO, the CPO role evolves. Because I think there's going to be a big need for, again, I think trust is going to rise to like the number one thing organizations need in order to be productive and profitable.
I agree. And I'm like you, I'm excited. I mean, it's a little bit scary, right? Because I mean, if you start thinking about how these things compound, you're like, oh boy. I mean, there's gonna be a lot in our shoulders, right? And again, like we are the ones that have like a better feeling, or we should be having a better feeling of, hey, this is what this side of the organization needs. This is what this other side needs, and this is how we can bring them together. And so that will be a lot in this journey. But as always, I mean, ideally, right, as HR leaders, we are in a very strong partnership with our leadership teams. Let's say we're not alone. And if you build that team the right way, right, then at least you're not alone in the quest. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting, and I'm excited for the years ahead.
Yeah. I like that's a very encouraging way to end the program is that, if it's not all on your shoulders, right? The entire the entire business can't be made or broken by a single individual, but there is a lot of pressure and there's a lot of change. Do you have any other sort of parting words of wisdom or encouragement for our HR audience as we wrap it up?
Yeah, well, I mean, as always, I think with HR, because we're taking care of everyone, we have a tendency of neglecting ourselves in the process. So I just always an invitation, right? How I keep myself centered is like, let me make sure I'm doing well, on my end, that I know that I'm doing things the right way with my team. And then also like I can take care of others, right? It's like being a mom or, like the example of the plane, you first put on your oxygen mask,
Yep.
then you can take care of all others. So just a reminder, because again, there's going to be a lot in our shoulders, and the amount of change, it's quite significant. I don't think we've seen something like this, not even with COVID, honestly, where we had to shift from one way to the other, from one day to the other, because this is here to stay and it'll continue to be constant. But I think we just got to make sure we got to be very, let's say, self-aware. We got to know ourselves really well, so then we can actually, pass that over to the organizations and to the leaders that we work with.
Thank you so much, Paula. I really enjoyed our conversation. We covered a lot of ground. Is there a way that our listeners can stay in touch with you? Maybe on LinkedIn or?
Yeah, maybe through my LinkedIn profile, or you can find me through Paula Slater, or maybe we can, through the
We'll
post,
post the
also do
link.
it there. Yeah, we
We'll
can do
post
it
the
there.
link in the description.
Yes,
Great
exactly.
talking with you. Thank you so much, Paula.
No, thank you so much, Emily.